Do you want to know how much I've paid for all of my gardening supplies? I don't, but I'm going to go through all of my Amazon orders pertaining to gardening, and I'm going to tell you what was worth it. My name is Em. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Let's get into the video. The first category we are going to go over are just basic things. So things that you need in order to garden, whether you're gardening on a small scale or a larger scale. I think a gardening bag is worth it. I bought this one a couple years ago, and it comes with all of the tools, gloves, a spray bottle, and some snippers. And honestly, I like the bag. It's cute, but the tools are a little bit cheap. If you're working in very hard soil like I do in Colorado, some of these tools will bend when you're digging into that hard soil. The gloves did not fit me, but it's always good to have backup gloves, I think. And the pruners that came with it, not good at all. They weren't sharp. They kind of just shredded my plants. I think this is semi worth it, maybe to get you started. Again, the bag is really nice. There are probably other bags out there that don't include the tools at all, but this is a really good starter bag, I would say. But I think you'd be better off purchasing the pruners and the gloves separately. Speaking of gloves, these are the gloves I got, and I love them. I've been using them for 2 years. Actually, I've been only using the blue one for 2 years, and I figured I would use the other color when my blue ones are completely worn out. Those blue ones are looking really rough. There's no holes in them yet or anything, just some of the rubber has come off. I would say I think these gloves are worth it, especially at $8.99, and they fit my hands nicely. I wouldn't say I have super small hands or super large, but they're tight enough that they're not falling off my hands, and that is what I wanted. A watering can. I love this watering can. It is 2 gallons, which is quite large, but actually very convenient because you don't have to refill it as much as a smaller watering can. I also love that it has a filter, so you can soak fertilizer in it, and then the filter will filter out the solid bits, but then you can still water with your now fertilized water. And I also love the large nozzle. You can turn it so it's facing upwards or downwards, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to water, especially when you have it super full and the watering can is heavy. Pruners. I love these pruners. These things, 100% worth it. They're $11.99, which is not a bad price at all, and they are so sharp. It has one single blade on top, and it cuts down into a little rubber portion. It also has a locking feature, so you can lock them when they're not in use, but it also has 2 settings. So one setting is a little bit looser for your hands. This is just for snipping off smaller leaves or anything else that I would say is less than 1/4 inch. And the next setting can cut things over 1/4 inch, I would say. It's for bigger branches, and I think it just applies more force when you're snipping through things. I've also had these for 2 years, and I try to keep the blade as clean as possible, and I have not seen any dulling of the blade yet. And snippers. Oh, I love these. These snippers are so good when you need to trim very small leaves, especially for thinning your seedlings. It is perfect for that. The blade is a little bit curved, and they're super sharp, very light. I love them so much. These things are really great for getting into small areas or doing a bit of a more detailed prune or thinning of seedlings. They're just awesome. I highly recommend these. A kneeling pad. This thing has saved me so many times. Not only do I use it to kneel, but I also use it to sit on, so I don't get dirt all over me or I'm not sitting on a hard surface for a long time. I definitely use this on my apartment balcony. It really helps my knees, and I think it's highly worth it. It's $8.99. Your knees and your bum will thank you. Now we're going to get into seed starting. Before you can just dive into gardening season, well, you need to plant some seeds. Yes, you can buy a lot of starts from the store, but if you're going to go about this in more of a budget-friendly way, I have some tools for you. Number 1, a potting mat. This thing is amazing. I've used it for my houseplants, and I've also used it for seed starting. It's a flat mat, and the corners snap together, which helps to contain the soil so you don't get soil all over the place. I use this on my apartment balcony. I've used it on my dining room table. I've used it on the floor. I just love it so much. I also think this thing is highly worth it. A soil sifter. This, I would say, is very optional. If you're not using a seed starting mix, it might be worth it to you to get a soil sifter. Just general potting soil can be really chunky, and it has rocks and bark in it. And if you are planting seeds in that type of soil, your little tiny seedling won't be able to pop up through the soil because maybe there's a rock on top of it or a large piece piece of bark. So that is where the soil sifter comes in. I love the little green thing that comes with it. It's great for scooping the soil so you don't have to use your hands. And it comes with 3 different filters, one that has a finer mesh and one that has a bigger mesh. And you just put your soil in there and kind of sift it out. This one that I have is maybe this big, and I got it so it would fit on top of a 5-gallon bucket. So I can just sift all my soil into a bucket. And then in the bucket, we'll have nice, fine, fluffy seed starting soil for me. And with soil comes soil blocking. There are many ways to start your seeds. Some people put them in little tiny pots or trays, and I use soil blocks. They are awesome. They're not difficult to work with at all. You dampen your soil that you're going to use and you stick it into the soil blocker. There are little plastic pieces that press into the soil. So after you pack the soil in there, you push it out onto a tray, which I will talk about soon, and you have little blocks of soil, and it's perfect. They have a little hole from that little piece that pressed into the soil, and you can drop your seed right in the hole. It makes it so much easier. Also, since there's air on the outside of each soil block, the air helps to air prune the roots, which means your roots won't grow out of control and they won't grow into other soil blocks unless the soil blocks are all touching very, very tightly. So that's really nice because sometimes if you use the little pots, the roots will start coming out the bottom and you have to keep upgrading those seedlings into bigger pots. As they get larger with the soil blocks, the plants can get pretty large before you have to pot them up into a bigger pot. So that is what I like about them the best. Also, it's so easy to water because you just water the tray and the soil will soak up all that water, which is really great in keeping down any kind of like fungal issues. Trays. So I have 2 sets of trays. I bought these trays right here for $16.99 and it's a 5-pack. And then I bought these ones over here. These are $19.99 and it's a 10-pack. The only reason I bought the 10-pack was because I was going to go buy the 5-pack again and they were out. So I had to go buy the 10-pack. So I have 15 of them. Both trays work great. They're similar in size and they're just a necessity. They're definitely worth it. I will line up a whole bunch of soil blocks in one tray, which helps save on space majorly, especially if you are starting seeds in a smaller place, like an apartment, like me. And where are you going to put the trays? Well, I have a mini greenhouse and I think it's totally worth it. I didn't want to get a very wide one. I wanted to make sure I got a vertical one to take up less space in my apartment. And this one has worked great. It fits 2 trays on each level. I also clip a little fan in there to have air movement so the air isn't stagnant, which can also cause fungal issues. And I have grow lights in there, which I attach to the top of each shelf. So all of the plants will have lights, which is so important. And these are the grow lights that I use. They're $24. It's a little expensive, but it comes with 4 of them. I bought 2 packs, I believe. So I have 8. And to me, I think that's worth it. I can put 2 grow lights over each tray and they're really flat. I just zip tie them to the shelving and they seem to work out really well. I believe you can make them brighter or less bright depending on how tall your plants are. I used those last year and they worked out so well. My plants were doing just fine. Another thing for seed starting, which helps speed up seed starting so much, is a heat mat. I think I have 2 of them. So what I do is on one shelf of the greenhouse, I roll out one, and then on another shelf, I roll out the other. So then 4 trays can have heat. It helps heat from the bottom and it warms up the soil a little bit to get those seeds to germinate faster. It kind of tells the seeds like it's warm enough, it's moist enough. Eventually, when they do sprout, they'll see that there's light. And with all of that, you will definitely have success at starting seeds inside and then eventually transferring them outside into the garden. With seed starting though, I will say insects, you can't avoid them. Fungus gnats, I had such an issue with fungus gnats last year, and this is what I did. I set up these sticky traps. I put them in the trays between like the blocks of soil. That helped catch a lot of fungus gnats. I also bought this insect trap. It was awesome. I plugged it in and I put it at the bottom of the greenhouse, and the UV light will attract the bugs. And then it has a fan that sucks the bugs in. At the bottom of this insect trap is another sticky thing. So the bugs just kind of get sucked in continuously and they stick to the sticky trap. It's genius. I love it. Definitely worth it. Now we're going to talk about gardening outside. So either on your balcony or in the ground. First, I'm going to talk about some balcony things, but these can also be outside on your patio or even in your gardening space. The first thing are grow bags. I use these 3-gallon grow bags out on my balcony and it provides a large amount of room to grow. In mine, I have strawberries and I'm trying to overwinter them so I have more strawberries this spring. You can grow grow potatoes in grow bags. These are great because they're smaller than a raised bed and they're easy to move around. I love them. To go with the grow bags, I bought a drip tray for all of them, and I bought one that was big enough to fit under. So my grow bags are probably this wide, and I found a drip tray that fits that. It's like this big and it's perfect. Drip trays are so necessary if you have neighbors living below you and you don't have like a concrete balcony, because if you water the grow bags, it's going to drip down onto your neighbors, and I did not want to do that. So I bought these drip trays. This also helps protect whatever the grow bags are on. So whether they're on concrete or wood, when you're watering them, that water won't go and just sit on the wood below or the concrete. I think they're totally worth it, and it keeps things nice and tidy. I bought this raised garden bed for my apartment balcony, and I love it. It's amazing. It's a perfect size. It's not too wide or long. It has wheels so you can lift up one side and you can move it around, which I've had to move it around so many times. It has a little shelf on the bottom so you can put your gardening supplies on it. It does have a hole underneath so the water can drip down. Last year I just put one of those large drip trays right under there, and I put some plants as well, and it worked out perfectly. I loved it. This raised bed is under $60. I got it for $59.82. So whether it's a little bit above that or a little bit below that, I still think it's worth it because it's just the perfect size for a smaller balcony or just a small space in general. I also got hanging baskets. These are the ones that I bought. They were $19.99. It did say the product was unavailable, so it might come back, but it might not. So I decided to leave you some alternatives like this one, this one, this one, and this one. They're all great looking. I think they all had pretty good reviews, and they all have drip trays. That is one thing about the ones that I got that go over a railing, is that it has a drip tray underneath it to catch any water. So again, it's not dripping down onto your neighbors. All of these other ones don't hang on a railing. They seem to be hanging on a hook from above. You might be able to do that in an apartment. You might not. I just wanted to leave some alternative options since the original railing hanger ones that I have aren't available. And this next one is for if you have an allotment, a community garden, or maybe you have a backyard with a smaller gardening area. I bought this short hose. I didn't want to get a giant standard size hose because it would take up too much space, and I didn't need that. My community garden plot is 10 feet by 20, and this works perfectly. The spigot is right next to my garden plot, so I just attach it to that, and I can stand about halfway in, so 10 feet in, and reach everything with my sprayer on it. If you have a smaller space, this hose might be worth it for you. It also has on either end these little grips, so it'll make it easier for you to attach to the spigot or attach to a hose attachment. I will say, since I am attaching it and unattaching it all the time to the spigot, I do need to replace the gasket about halfway through the season because it starts to get a little damaged. To go with the hose is this sprayer, and I love this sprayer. I made a point to buy a all metal sprayer because the plastic ones will break, and I don't want to deal with that. I wanted to buy one sprayer and have to use it for a really long time before I have to replace it. This one is amazing because you use your thumb to control the flow of water rather than gripping it with your hand, which takes pressure off of your hand, and it makes it really easy to water everything. It has great water pressure. I can reach all parts of my garden, and I definitely think this thing is worth it. I bought this saw originally for camping, and then I used it in the garden, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. It is so sharp. It's very large. I used it a lot to cut down plants at the end of gardening season. It's really great to get at the base of the stem, and then you can start sawing, and it slices through it like butter. It's so smooth, very, very sharp. It's $18.99, and I don't think that's a bad price at all for a sturdy, sharp saw. And a tiller. This is great for small spaces, or if you don't want to buy an electric tiller, which I definitely did not want to buy. I used this to till up my entire 10 by 20 foot garden, and it worked so great. Tilling is very important because if you have dense soil, things won't grow very well. The roots won't be able to spread. If you're growing a root vegetable like a carrot or a beet, they won't be able to get as big or as long because the soil is too compact. The tiller helps break it up. This one's great. You stick it in the ground and you twist. It does take a lot of elbow grease to really get in there and till up everything, but I think it's worth it. It doesn't take up too much space, and it's really easy to use. I think it definitely made a difference for my carrots last year. The next thing is fertilizer. Fertilizing can be very, very complicated, and I see people complicate it a lot. If it's too complicated for me, I'm just not going to do it. So I just got a very general fertilizer. Right now it's $8.16 a steel. Go buy some. I like to fertilize at the beginning of the season. You can pour it all over the soil and then and till it into the soil, it will break down with watering and whatnot. And then also I like to fertilize like halfway through the season just to give everything a boost. And that's all I do. Now we're going to talk about staking, which sounds a little boring, but like it's so important. These are little clips. They help with staking your plants up. I used this last year for my cantaloupe. I staked the vines onto a vertical trellis. It worked awesome. I also used it for tomatoes. As the tomatoes got taller, I would put a green stake, which I will talk about soon, and then I would use the clips to clip the tops of the tomato plants to them. And as they got taller, I just did that. I just kept going with it and it worked great. This has two sizes, one larger and one smaller. I definitely think the clips are worth it. They're so much easier to use than the little plastic ones that kind of interlock with each other. Those things will break in half, and these ones, I have not broken a single one yet. And the stakes, these are stakes that you shove into the soil and then you can attach them one by one with the little adapters in between. And it does come with clips and other attachments. You can use these and you can make a trellis for your plants. You can use them to stake up your tomato plants. You can kind of connect them in all types of ways to whatever suits your needs. And that's why I loved them, because I can build different types of trellises with them. And I thought that was great. And then more stakes. These are like staple stakes. They call them landscape staples. These are great for netting or garden fleece, row covers. It keeps them safely secure in the ground so nothing flies away with the wind. And we're going to talk about weather and pest protection. So like I was talking about before, row covers. These row covers are amazing. You use the staples to stick them into the soil so they don't blow away. They pretty much create a mini greenhouse on top of your plants. I used these last year when I was on the edge of my last frost date and nights were a little bit uncertain. So I would cover my sensitive plants up at night and it helps retain the heat in there, and it saved a ton of my plants last year. I also used this on top of my raised bed on my balcony and it worked great for that. They're great for anytime you're gonna have a surprise freeze. And if you don't want to buy a row cover like that, you can buy greenhouse hoops. These are fiberglass rods that you can bend to make a hoop, and then you can attach netting or garden fleece onto them. It's just like those other row covers, except that you have to do all the work to kind of create the row. For these, you can put netting right here. That'll help with pest protection, or you can do garden fleece right over here, which will help with weather protection. Again, if it gets too cold or there's a sudden surprise freeze, these are great for covering the plants up to protect them from any harsh temperatures. And there's a few things I do to help with pests. Number one is diatomaceous earth. I love diatomaceous earth. It is a soft, crumbly, porous, sedimentary deposit formed from the fossil remains of diatoms. This one comes with a little squeeze duster, so it's easier to use. What it does is any soft-bodied insect that comes in contact with diatomaceous earth gets cut up by the sharp pieces of the diatomaceous earth, and then it kind of sucks all the moisture out of them. So they dehydrate, essentially. It's really gross and gruesome, but it works, and I love it. It's safe for humans and pets. It's not going to hurt us. Obviously, don't breathe it in, but I love it. You can use it on all of your plants. I've used it inside before to help with pests. Like, it's good stuff. The next thing I use for pest control is neem oil. I buy the concentrated version of it. It's a natural product, which I like. I just water it down and I put it into my electric sprayer right here, which I love my electric sprayer so much. You charge it with like a USB cord and the charge lasts forever. I didn't charge it at all last year. You press the button to turn it on and it just sprays for you. Again, you don't have to clamp onto something forever. You just simply press the button and it goes. You press it again, it turns off. This bottle is half a gallon, but I think that's perfect for making a pest spray. It helps me so I don't have to waste any, because I usually don't have any left over. But like I said, I usually do a capful of neem oil, pour it in there, and then fill it up with water and just spray away. Another thing I use in my sprayer is BT. This is good stuff. It's natural. It's a bacteria that fights against caterpillars specifically. Caterpillars usually are the cause of cabbage moths. So if you're growing anything from the Brassica family, you're most likely going to have to be battling cabbage moths. But what comes before these moths are the caterpillars. They'll be all over your kale, cabbage, broccoli, and they will decimate your plants. I like to spray this stuff all over the bottom side of my plants. That's where the caterpillars usually hang out, and it really reduced the population of caterpillars last year. There's also something called BTI, which is very similar, and it's also known as mosquito bits. This is great for adding to any standing water you have. I like to add this into the drip trays on my patio. I also like to put this in my watering can and water with it because it helps get rid of any larvae in your soil. So this is another thing for fungus gnats. This will help kill fungus gnat larvae larva, which will of course help reduce your fungus gnat population when you're seed starting. So I like to put these in the trays with the soil blocks, and it helps reduce the population majorly. Now, if you're still having issues with fungus gnats and you want to get aggressive with it, I recommend getting an electric fly swatter. I love mine. I will stick it into the greenhouse and turn it on and just wave around, and it's so satisfying hearing the zaps because I know that I'm killing off those dreadful fungus gnats. Now we're going to go into a miscellaneous category. I didn't quite know where to put these. The first thing is straw. Weed-free straw. The best kind has tack on it. So you lay it down and the tack helps to keep the straw where it is and it won't blow away with the wind. It just stays put. The reason why you need weed-free is, well, if you use straw with weeds in it and you put it in your garden and you water it, then you're going to have a whole bunch of plants that you don't want. A reason why I use straw is it's a weed suppressant. You can lay it all around and under your plants pretty thick, and it will help reduce the amount of weeds popping up. I really loved using it last year. It never blew away. It was there the whole time, and depending on how big your garden is how much you should get. I left two options in the description. One that covers 200 square feet and another that covers 600 square feet. I used the brand Easy Straw last year and I did not have any issues with weeds at all. I think it's a really good, trusted brand. Another thing is if you're growing a lot of herbs and you're harvesting way more than you can consume, I recommend getting a hanging herb dryer. These things are great. It doesn't take any power to use. They compress down into like this big and they are huge. There's a lot of room. I used this last year for a lot of my herbs to dry them out and also finishing dried beans. So I would pick dried beans before they're all the way dry. They're not quite crisp, and I would put them in there for a couple days and that would finish up the drying process. If you don't have a dehydrator or you don't want to use a dehydrator because you have such a little amount of herbs or whatever the reason is, I highly recommend a hanging herb dryer. And the last thing I wanted to add, because when you're gardening, you really need to know what's going on with the weather. And I personally bought a weather station for my balcony. I'm also a huge weather nerd. So this gives me stats directly to my phone. I can see what happened last night. What was the low? What was the high? Was it super windy? Did it rain? Oh, it's so good. Of course, with my balcony, I don't get super accurate information just because there is a little bit of a roof over it. So I don't really get the correct rainfall amounts. But if you have room to put it somewhere where there's an open sky above it and it'll be accurate, it's so highly worth it. It connects to Wi-Fi. So as long as you have Wi-Fi, you can still get your data. I have an app that I follow my own weather station on, and I also follow the weather stations that are really close to the community garden, because then I can see if it rained or if it got down to freezing the night before. I can also see if it's really, really windy and what the UV index is. So to me, the weather station, highly worth it. All of these products will be linked below in the description if you want to check them out. Most of these products were, I would say, worth it in my opinion, but I did let you know little things here and there that maybe didn't work out so well. I hope this video helped you in some way, or maybe gave you some inspiration for your garden this year. And I wish you so much abundance with your garden. I hope you have massive yields and you can eat from it all summer long. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want to follow me along on my community garden journey. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.